Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. This episode is specifically targeted at the heads of military intelligence, so-called, and the oligarchs in the world, whoever they might be and wherever they might be. This is a bit of an emergency broadcast because, ladies and gentlemen, we have hit the iceberg a long time ago and we are sinking. We are sinking around the world. We have discussed Titanic turners versus scorpions, and I also pointed out that it is too late for the Titanic turners. Turning the Titanic is just wasting time. We are already sinking. So what are we going to do? Why are we sinking, and what on earth are we going to do? This is what this video is about. And for those who just tuned in, it's a bit heavy going, and you might hear about a lot of topics you haven't maybe heard about before. So just a brief recap of why I'm standing here pontificating at all, instead of just going to bed as I should at this hour of the night. The situation is the following. We have certain legacy structures in our world which have existed for a very long time. They have existed for centuries, if not millennia. And they have carried over, like systems usually do, unless there's a big cataclysmic event. A large-scale system just continues as before. It sucks in people and it, creates alumni and so on. But the system cycles people and continues throughout time, even though the people might change and pass away. So governments, for example, are these large systems that live for much longer than individuals do. But there are other structures. There are, for example, secret societies, there are companies, many complex systems that have exactly the same sort of pattern. Now, it is through that mechanism that we ended up in the 21st century with legacy systems that are pretty much, antediluvian, more or less. As the programmers amongst you know, legacy systems are not necessarily something very nice. For example, I remember William Binney saying that when he got a new grant and took over a big project, he decided to, with his team, to start from scratch. And his condition was that there are not to be any legacy systems. It's all to be rewritten. Now, that at first sounds like a lot of work, but why would somebody with, the level of insight of William Binney go for the option of just redesigning everything from scratch? Well, that's simply because, and again, those of you who are programmers will know this effect very, very well. If you go with adopting legacy systems, you will be lumbered with the total integral of all your predecessors' cock-ups. And because you haven't screwed up yourself, you don't really know where these screw-ups are, and you're in for surprises. So it is a very non-linear sort of thing. At first, it seems like you're saving time by taking over legacy systems, but the time-wasting distribution has a long tail, and sometimes you end up trying to track down bugs and faults in the system that will take you forever to track down, so you're wasting a lot of time. Whereas if you're writing everything yourself, you have it stored in your own memory, you're communicating with your colleagues about it, you can put in your own safety mechanisms and cross-checks and double-checks, and there's nothing like the mistakes you make yourself, really. They are the most digestible, and psychologically also people are a lot happier wasting time ironing out their own mistakes than ironing out other people's mistakes. That's purely psychological. So nevertheless, all these things matter. So legacy systems in computer science or programming are very bad thing. In engineering, they're also a very bad thing. Most of the time, unless something is designed really beautifully, legacy systems are to be avoided at all costs. So why is it that we're still sticking around with the legacy systems that are, predate the French Revolution? And this is a combination of inertia inherent in the system. It's also inertia inherent in human systems. And it's also because for a very, very long time, people didn't understand, and even to this day, people don't really understand how these legacy systems actually operate, how they are even designed, because a lot of the moving parts are hidden. And this goes to the heart of the matter, because we're now in a phase of history where we are uncovering a lot of hidden systems. So if you go online and you search around for things that used to be hidden, you will come across quite amazing things about the currencies and what happened to governments, and how they might have been turned into corporations, what birth certificates actually are, what other things, crazy and scary things out there on the stock market, and so on and so on. So we're really pulling back the curtain. And the one place where the curtain still needs some pulling is the control architecture of our societies, because it underpins absolutely everything. And now this is where it gets interesting, because it is about control. People had an interest covering up, having strong control mechanisms, and at the same time keeping them hidden. Simply because if you have very strong control mechanisms and everybody knows about them, then they will try to take over, and then they really strongly control something that you set up. So that's not good. So you want to keep it hidden. So you have this what we expect to find in the control architecture of our world is something that offers very strong control and is very, very well hidden, but yet pervasive, because you have to have control everywhere if you want to have control. So we're looking for something very strong, very hidden, yet everywhere, prevalent everywhere. Okay, so in previous episodes we already discussed a lot of these things. We discussed, for example, the importance of pedophilia, that it's about generating control files. So if you have here the organigram, and you have a system that you would like to capture, you would like to control, we discussed that at the top you're accumulating psychopaths. So if you want to control psychopaths, you need something really strong, like a control file. And a control file has to be something that maybe appeals to psychopaths, at the same time is also horrific enough that should it become known, it is a control mechanism over psychopaths who famously don't care about very many things apart from themselves. So it has to be something extraordinary. So that doesn't leave many options. It leaves, roughly speaking, pedophilia, necrophilia, and serial killings. So, that's the sort of stuff we expect to find. And of course, then you hear Pizzagate and reports of serial killings of children, and you think, yeah, that sounds about right. And not that it would be right, as in, it's the right thing to do, but it's exactly what you would expect in the League of Psychopaths. So that's one control mechanism. But then there are also others. There are also much more subtle ones, because the question is, how do you control the people who control the control files? Right? That's the key question. Now, who controls the control files? Well, it's the intelligence agencies, okay? Because they do all the infiltration, all the profiling, all the psychological manipulation, and yada, yada, yada. So for that, they need to know what to blackmail people with. They need to know their psychological profiles and so on. So they will be the holders of the control files. So how do you control the heads or the leadership of the intelligence agencies? You need a control file is a good start, and all of them will have them, which will be kept elsewhere. Maybe it will be kept by another intelligence agency, or it will be kept by a structure above the intelligence agency. But given the sort of chaps you're working with, that might not be enough. Especially not because you're dealing with the agency who controls the control files and controls the media. So should push come to shove, they could iron out the control you would like to have over them by counter moves. So very quickly, very, very quickly, throughout the millennia, senior psychopaths at the top figured out that to control each other, they need something much stronger than that. So how would you create that? And if you just think about a system that is already in existence, and you think, okay, these psychopaths are there now at time 0, so day 1, and now you want to control them, that's very difficult. But this is not how it works. It's a continuously cycling system whereby tricks and knowledge gets accumulated, and people keep changing. So people come and leave and rise and then die off, and then other people come in. So there's a never-ending flow of people cycling through the system. So when you have something like that, people can also get creative. So one way, if you want to control another person, this is something that every parent knows, is if you get them young. So it would also imply that people who rise very high in the intelligence agencies might have been controlled as children, either because their parents are intelligence agents or because they were taken on as orphans. So these are the two options: orphans and people with proper parents in the intelligence agencies or other control organs, and people who maybe were orphans and then were placed, so foster children and so on, because then you control them. And foster children and orphans tend to fall victim of a lot of control mechanisms because their parents, their nominal parents, do not have the same emotional attachment to them. But there's also cases where parents do this to children as well. So it's not just, orphans. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. We're looking at the top for people who maybe were groomed as children and went through the system as children, and then have also other control files on them to do with pedophilia, to do with serial killing or necrophilia. So horrible stuff. I hate that I have to keep saying it, but this is just what it is. So, okay. So this is what we're looking for in the intelligence agency specifically, or the military, or any sort of very, very powerful control structure, where at the top you would want to have extra controls in addition to the control files. So getting them young and trying to bind them to you through emotional means. Maybe this could be, having a father figure. So this is something that's played on and portrayed as the mechanism in the James Bond films, for example. I think there was one James Bond film where they talked about the fact that he was an orphan and he was brought up by another agent or brought into the agency, and he had this sort of like trusting, was a trust figure, father figure for little James Bond. So that is what they put in films. So if they put it into films, it's probably not the full story, it's probably the sanitized version. So whatever we're looking for, it's not going to be just, orphans being taken on by a very kind, warm, loving uncle type who becomes a father figure and convinces them to work for MI6. I wish it were, but I don't think it's strong enough for a control mechanism when you are breeding psychopaths. Because psychopaths typically don't give a damn about their parents, so that's not going to be strong enough. So you need something else. So very quickly, and it's portrayed as if this started happening in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. I'm referring now to MKUltra and all these mind control, mind shattering programs, but actually they are much older than that. They are much older than that, and if you know what to look for, you will find references to it in the artwork. If you're a systems analyst, you expect to find it, so you will look for signs, and that is millennia old. It really is that old, and simply for the reason because psychopaths do what psychopaths do. And then as they do that, they figure out they have a competitive advantage over other people who just can't take all the gore because they actually have compassion and empathy and all this sort of stuff. And they discover that they have this incredible competitive advantage to do with hurting other people, killing other people, and so on. Okay, so this pointless violence sort of department. So they will just play around with it because they are thrill seekers and so on. And so very early on, people discovered that taking children would be a good idea. And then you have psychopaths taking on children to groom them for control positions. And then they would be psychopaths, so they would be maybe killing or traumatizing other people and harming them. and then they would play around with the children, and very quickly you end up with pretty much the sort of MKUltra Monarch trauma based programming. Very quickly, you don't have to have, you know, the CIA doing it. You can have, you know, someone doing it in ancient Egypt, and this is precisely what we're looking for. Okay, so when you have, for example, Freemasonry, and these, I talked about Freemasonry in a previous episode about the symbols and what it actually is. It is the senior psychopath control structure of gullible men, of stupid men. So, you know, you organize them into, it's essentially a loyalty scheme. So you organize these men into these towers of levels. So it's like 33, I mean, fuck me, yeah, 33 levels. Who can be bothered with that? What sort of loyalty scheme is it? So, you know, that's the whole point. The point is that even if you rise a level every year, which I don't think you do, then it will still take you 33 years, so entire working career. So the point is you're not meant to reach the top. Okay, so people keep you entertained as you rise through the ranks, and they keep promising you stuff, but actually what you are is you are in a hamster wheel of senior psychopaths who just want you to keep going in this loyalty scheme. That's what it is. Freemasonry is a loyalty scheme for stupid people to serve senior psychopaths. So all the symbols of Freemasonry and everything these people come up with, you know, or come to you with, that they're so proud of, I can tell you, the people at the very top, they are not going to bother with those, because these are symbols they invented for you. And this is why this entire tower thing is an obelisk. It's a knob shape, because you're all, in terms of Freemasonry, the League of Dickheads. It's inscribed in the actual symbolism. And why is it inscribed? Because senior psychopaths just want to ridicule others. They're not going to thank you, they want to ridicule you. So the symbolisms will be a form of ridicule, but so subtle you don't recognize it until you assemble the picture. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. So we have these control mechanisms, and then MKUltra and Monarch. I don't really want to go into the details of all this stuff, but because it's volumes and volumes. But that is what you very quickly settle on as the extra level of control beyond the control files. So if you like, control files, you know, are enough for normal people. For psychopaths who don't really care and are thrill seekers and in the moment sort of people, you need hardware switches. You need something that's inscribed in their brain. And I think even if you have a psychopath, if you just get them young, you can condition controls in forms of hardware switches. And that makes it extremely powerful, because otherwise controlling a psychopath is very hard, because he or she, mostly he, doesn't care. He just doesn't care. So this is it. So by just thinking about it for longer than 3 seconds, you very quickly settle on the fact that all the heads of the intelligence agencies, especially military intelligence, will be what we would call these days Monarch programmed. They all have to be. They have to be. If they weren't, they wouldn't be allowed to rise to the top. So we know that they must all be psychopaths, and because they're psychopaths and because they're at the top, they must also be Monarch programmed. Yeah? Take that in. Take that in. So this means that there are other layers above the intelligence agencies. They will have ultimate control, and they can make these people flip in a moment. Now, so far, I haven't made any references to anything. I haven't shown you any sources, and this is just what you arrive at, thinking about it, and how the system works, and how the system would have to work from a systems engineering point of view, and this is what you arrive at. So are there any indications? And yes, there are. There's, for example, and again, I refer you to one of the very few sources I have about all this, which is these blog posts called MI5 and MI6 Exposed. And I think there are 3 of them, and I think I managed to find 2, and the first one is either subsumed into another one or it doesn't exist anymore. Either way, in those blog pages and the comments below those pages, somewhere in there was a description of somebody who was senior British intelligence, and in an argument he seems to have killed his wife. I think he threw her out of a window. And what I remember, the name doesn't really matter, because we're just interested in the control structure. We're not actually interested in any individuals for now. This is just about the control structure, because that's what's important. The system is important. So this man is described as having thrown his wife out of a window, killing her, and she was, if I remember correctly, a woman, a wife with 4 children, maybe even 4 daughters, although I don't remember it, but she was a mother of 4. So for husband to throw a mother of 4 out of a window, that is not normal. So we're not in the normal category, right? It is nothing at that level, senior level. It has nothing to do with weaponized morons. So it has to be a senior level psychopath. Okay, it's a psychopath for sure. But then what set him off? Because especially when you're so high profile and you're in the limelight, you wouldn't really do that, no matter how angry you are. So very likely that was a switch being triggered. Either a hardware switch which is Monarch based, or it is a hardware switch which is electronics based. I have this gut feeling that it was always a mix of both, even in the 50s and 60s and 70s, although I can't prove that. But whatever it was one of these hardware switches, or it was an electromagnetic, brain override with brain waves, or whatever you want to call it, triggering anger, triggering uncontrollable anger, and then triggering a runaway process whereby maybe even a loving husband would kill his wife in a spectacular fashion. Why would you do that? Well, you would do that for retribution. You would do that if at the control architecture, at the senior level, people do not do what you want them to do. That's what the whole point is in these control architectures, right? It's control. So if you can't control it, you have to have some cost associated. Otherwise, people will just, stop following your orders. So without knowing a shade more about this case, at first when I read that, I thought, okay, senior psychopath, what do you expect? And then when I thought about it a bit harder, I thought, yes, senior psychopath, sure. But because he's a senior psychopath, he will not be necessarily that prone to emotions. So, psychopaths can be set off, but they are very callous, calculating people, and this is not calculating. This is something being set off. So there's an example that I've come across. Of course, I can't check those blog entries, nor do I need to. It's enough that I use just systems analysis to arrive at a certain state of affairs, and then finding randomly a blog post that happens to confirm that in a very specific sort of way. That's already enough of a statistical outlier. That's not really coincidence. So I pretty much can believe those blog posts. I do expect to see something like that, and then I did. Then there's another bit in the blog post which is the people writing it mentioned that after that all news reports, not the news reports, I think the news reports were left standing, but all photographs of this man and his wife have disappeared off the internet. Why would that be? And of course the first thought is that's because you don't want this murder to be known. It could be, but then again, if you're dealing with MI6, MI5, you can cover up pretty much everything. Okay, news reports leaked out, okay, but what's the importance of the images? And it was about all images that disappeared. I think either of this woman, I think it was the woman, all photographs of the woman disappeared, or it was maybe the photographs of the man being shown together with the woman. But I think it's just, in general, all images of this woman disappeared off the internet. Now, of course, the intelligence agencies can do that. The question is, why would that be necessary once the death is known? So you leave the articles with the death, but you don't leave the images. Well, I guess that there are some sort of triggers associated with those images. And if it's in news reports online, they can always be flashed back. Maybe setting off something, maybe setting off people who you don't know who they are. Something along those lines. That's what I would expect. So this unusual form of wiping seems to indicate again that it could be just purely emotional, of course, but it's more than that, because we're dealing with a league of psychopaths. They don't care. So it has an extra level of importance, and the only importance I can think about is as some sort of trigger. So these images, I would guess, have been removed because they can trigger something, either the same sort of behavior or something else, or a memory. Maybe it's the memory of the behavior. Maybe it's remembering that one has done something in this guided state. So I will leave you to find these nuggets for yourself. But okay, so we've now arrived at this realization that very likely the heads of the intelligence agencies are Monarch programmed, if they know it or not. They might not know it, because I have heard about cases where people didn't really remember how they were programmed. Now, whatever has been done to these people has to be something special, because they themselves will be used to train others, to traumatize others. So you can't use the same sort of training that you would then make them use on others. You can maybe do it with one, right? I mean, you can program people many different ways, but you have to have one that they cannot remember. You have to have some sort of inner core of a control mechanism in all of them. So that's already interesting. Now, when you have this sort of situation, it becomes very clear why it is so very, very difficult to change anything. Now, why do we even want to change something? Well, the reason why we want to change something is because, as I explained, what we're doing, fighting the intelligence agencies with all this, the microwave attacks, the remote neural monitoring and all this sort of stuff, is we're actually wasting time. We are wasting time. There are some problems which are very, very ingrained, and they cannot be solved by any oligarch on the planet. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't solve these problems. And these problems are to do with the ecosystems, the collapsing ecosystems. And if you don't believe me that ecosystems are collapsing, I encourage you to watch a video, which is the recording of, I think, the Shasta County Supervisors meeting, or something like that, Supervisors board meeting. And that is about chemtrails and about spraying and geoengineering and this sort of stuff. And it's about aeroplanes indeed spraying undesirable stuff into the atmosphere, which they really shouldn't. And it's about, as a result, what happens to the ecosystems. Well, it's a very sobering assessment, really. It really is. And I encourage you to actually, go and listen to that. Listen to that 1 hour presentation, because this cannot be changed, okay? It doesn't matter how much money you have, the collapsing ecosystems will take a concerted effort involving everybody, because we have to come up with new ways of repairing and cleaning up our ecosystems. Now, the economy is pretty much the same thing. To kickstart the economy, you need to have the input from absolutely everybody. You can't just do it yourself. So again, here, you need the help of everybody. Now, we can't repair or clean up the ecosystems unless we cycle the economy out of the pollution and the chemtrailing and the general war economy that is just destroying ecosystems everywhere. So to be able to kickstart the economy and orient it towards cleaning up the ecosystems, we have to cycle finance. We can't cycle finance because people like Katherine Horton, for example, are being attacked with directed energy weapons. So we're back to the corruption because of, due to which we can't stop the directed energy weapon attacks. So that is the tower. Now this is the most urgent here. This is slightly less urgent, but nevertheless is necessary for this. And these are artificial problems entirely. So what we actually should be doing is get on to the real problems, and yet we are stuck with these artificial problems. And I was trying to explain, by now I have sent these messages to Swiss intelligence, German and British, and I spoke to Belgian intelligence, I believe, as well. And I've tried to make it clear so that everybody's on the same page that we really, really have to cut the crap. But it's to no avail. So there's something happening that these people cannot snap the F out of it. And I thought very long and hard what that could be, and I think this is exactly it. This is it. It's that at the very top, they have to take orders, because if they do not, they will be made to flip. And they will be possibly made to kill their own wife or kill their own children, and they will have no control over that. So at the end of the day, we can only do all this here and progress if the heads of intelligence agencies, especially military intelligence, break their Monarch programming. You have to remember what has been done to you. You have to remember, and you have to diffuse it. That is it. You have to diffuse it. There's no other way. And this is why maybe people are surprised that I'm even endeavoring to address, people at all levels, that I would address, leaders like that. But you have to understand, we have hit the Titanic. So what we need now is a system broadcast. And I will try to explain why we need a system broadcast. So a system broadcast is when you give the same message to the people at the top as you give to the people on the bottom of your pyramid. So, it's like, you've got loudspeakers everywhere on the Titanic blaring out the same message, and it doesn't matter if you're in first class or in third class, the loudspeakers are making the same announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have hit the iceberg. Please assemble on deck. That is it. Now, because we have hit the iceberg, we have to come up with a solution. And it is to come up with a solution that we need absolutely everybody. We can't have the death camps running, the death camps made up of directed energy weapons, because the people operating the directed energy weapons are morons, and they will hone in on the best and the brightest and the people of highest integrity. And that's precisely what we observe. So we can't have these death camps. We need the people we need especially the people in the death camps, because it looks like they're the people of highest integrity and the best and the brightest. So we have to get them out somehow. But we can't get them out until the intelligence agencies stop shooting them to bits with directed energy weapons. Now, you might ask, what on earth is that shooting to bits with directed energy weapons about? Well, so there are several layers to this. So number one is, you might want to test microwave weapons, but they have been tested in the 1950s and 60s, so we don't need to do that anymore. So what's the point? Well, then you could test the actual interaction of nanoparticles, which you clandestinely put into a victim's body, with electromagnetic weapons and microwaves. And that is certainly still being done, but that has also been pretty much done more or less in the 90s and so on. So what is this now about? And this is about ultimately the brain-computer interface. So now our senior psychopaths in our society have moved on to trying to control the human brain. And they control the human brain, as far as I can tell, through implants into your brain. So they can shoot things into your brain, for example, through the ceiling of your mouth, as I've heard, maybe through your ears, through your eye sockets, and lots of other stuff up your nose, whatever. And then put in micro implants or nanotech, and you can put nanotech, you inject it into the spine, and many ways you can think about that. And then you will end up with this technology in someone's brain, and then you can use electromagnetic waves to actually, interfere with it. Okay, so this is what they're actually doing. It's about trying to control human beings down to their thought level. And on this topic, actually, Bryan Tew has been writing some information on this, and I would like to read it out, because at first sight it looks like that is what this system is meant to be doing. But it is not. So what we're doing right now is we are mapping the Titanic, because we know that we've hit the iceberg, the Titanic is sinking, and we have to find a way to save ourselves. So we're looking at the engine of the Titanic to maybe figure out how to repair it, look at the hull, see if we can actually, close the hole or not. So this is what it is. On that topic, Bryan Tew sent me a message over Twitter, and he said, so he was saying, do not respond to anybody online, because this interaction and these conversations are used to map out your brain and then interfere, with your brain, and then send thoughts you had back to your brain and so on. So he wrote, by continuing to respond to their specific stimuli, you are cooperating and allowing the system to interpret and define your daily activities. At that point, the RNMs, so the remote neural monitoring supercomputers, the systems begins to mimic your normal cognitive behavior, which becomes so tolerable for you that you will eventually reach a point of no return, when you can no longer differentiate between their remote neural attacks and your own normal memory and thought process. That gives your attackers, the hive mind teams, or the remote neural monitoring system, the permanent ability to not only restrict you at will, but to deceive or manipulate you subconsciously with no working reference to revert back to. Once the cognitive model is complete, it's all over. So stop responding to their specific provocations, or you'll soon reach the point of no return. I am sorry. So that was one message, which is like, ooh, okay, so I must never actually reply to anybody. But then again, you think, yeah, but what about my family and other conversations? Okay. But this was one thing. Then there is more, and he says, hang on. Okay, so he says, this is training, research and development by Group of 20 United Nations Protocol. The industrialized nations of the world agreed 2 decades ago to turn the industrialized world into a neuro society where people can talk to each other and computers with their brain waves. To achieve this, they agreed that a certain level of non-consensual human experimentation was necessary and tolerable, provided those nations conducted such training, research and development on their own citizens. I have spoken in an interview with the Assistant United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, Discovery Channel, news media, satellite radio, etc. And I can tell you there's no hope of the media, courts, government, etc. being able to stop this. Go ahead, but you will soon realize it's too late. Okay. I just would like to say, if that's the case, Bryan, and we're really being hooked up to a supercomputer and people will get to know, well, they can just bump these people off, because electromagnetic weapons don't leave a trace. That's what I'm banging on about. It's a non-linear system. Anybody can bump off anybody without leaving traces. So, we can always do that. But anyway, so that is the second message. And then the third message was, he said, focus on achieving a basic understanding of the technology and the tactics being employed against you. Only then can you effectively defend yourself against it. Whether you believe it or not, you were chosen for this technology for reasons dealing with the training, research and development behind it, not simply because you entered a courtroom to witness a famous case. All targeted individuals fall into one of four categories: judicial targets, extrajudicial targets, lucrative targets, and targets of opportunity. And the reason you were chosen for the training, research and development of this technology is because you fell into one of those four categories. Now, that on first sight seems to be correct. However, and I am amazed how no one has figured this out, even that is not the real story. And you know how peeling back these curtains, there's always a level up, always a level up. You can figure out that this is not the ultimate story because there is a way to make even more money. Okay? Because here he lists some. So if you pick targets who are judicial targets, okay, you can remove competitors, extrajudicial targets and lucrative targets and targets of opportunity. Of course, you can sell them and traffic them, and you can earn money by doing that. But you can earn even more money by asset stripping countries. So this is why I'm saying the people, the victims of these programs are not just targets of opportunity. There's something extremely special about every single one of them. They are of the highest integrity, or they are, of specific intellect, specific insight, and I don't just mean academic achievement, I really mean intellect and insight, that other people do not have. This is, I think, an Intelligenzaktion. It's about removing the intelligentsia, and it's about fundamentally weakening a society by removing key elements, so key people. But these key people, and this is not a key, have been identified by large big data analysis, so large database analysis. And this means that to the untrained eye, it is not obvious what the pattern behind these people is and what their true importance is. But anybody who will have looked at their profile in a very sort of scientific way, mapped it in a way that is not obvious, will find that these people are somehow extremely special. And I think the selection process happens upstream. All these special people have to be taken in to the program and have to be eliminated to weaken a country. And then for every single one of them, you just, think of an excuse. You get people who maybe get interested in them and then, start, harassing them and so on and so on. But the absolute ultimate reason is to weaken a country, to asset strip it. That's where the real business plan lies. Okay? And you really have to know that. So this is about these directed attacks. So it's not about just microwaving and terrorizing people. It's about terrorizing them and mapping out their brain. But even that is not the ultimate story. It is not, because it's not the ultimate money-making scheme. And remember, the people at the top, they don't give a damn about science. They don't give a damn about talking to other people via brain waves, because they think they're all inferior. Why would you want to talk to your toaster? Right? You don't. And why would you want the toaster to talk to you? You most certainly do not. So at the very top, people unfortunately do not care about these scientific programs either. The story and the ultimate ulterior motif is one entirely different. And if you read carefully between the lines, you can actually see that. So in another email Bryan Tew sent to a lot of people on an email list, I'm sorry, I am so tired. If I look somehow dazed, it's because it's really way past bedtime. So what you have is, yes, he says, he says the RNM, so the remote neural monitoring supercomputer, bases its attacks on the mathematical model known as the hypergame theory, forcing the trauma-based mind control victim to respond. Now this sounds very fancy, this hypergame theory stuff. Let's see what it is. So watch, the game is beginning. This is a supercomputer attacking me with the pain and trauma to head and ears, and bouts of drowsiness causing me to repeatedly nod off in split second, almost passing out, vision blurring drowsiness, before I snap back to alert a second later. It is called censorship, using remote neural attacks of split-second drowsiness at regular intervals to prevent the Christian audio and video content from breaking brain entrainment with the RNM system and depatterning the satanic ritual abuse contained within neuroprogramming. Censorship means the RNM supercomputer attacking me is programmed with hypergame theory algorithms to use directed energy torture for pain and remote neural attacks of drowsiness, dizziness, etc. at regular 60-second intervals to disrupt my continuity of thought and to erase short-term active memory in order to keep Christian audio-video content from breaking brain entrainment with the remote neural monitoring system and depatterning the satanic ritual abuse contained within the neuroprogramming. Okay, so it is called hypergame theory. And now I'm reading this, and at first time when you read it, it sounds like, oh my god, this is so complicated. But actually on second reading, I have to say, no, this is hyperbolics. That's what it is, because it's ignoring the fact that all these human systems are just laid out to do one thing, and that is to make money. Okay, why? Because at this level you're dealing with just psychopaths. They don't care. They don't care. They like to torture people, but even so, they cannot be bothered to, dream up this big elaborate thing just to torture people, which they can do anyway. So it's really not about hypergame theory. This is hyper bullshit. What it is about, it's generating as much income as you possibly can in this system for the senior level psychopaths and for their little grunt, thugs on the street. So that's what it is. And why would you put it like that? Well, because if you just keep prodding somebody every minute, it creates work. Even if you've got an AI system, the AI has to be programmed and reprogrammed and so on and so on and so on. So what you've managed to program is a money-making scheme. That's what you managed to do, okay? This is not hyper game theory, this is hyper money making and hyper bullshit to make more money. So, okay, so this is what we're actually up against. So I understand what Bryan Tew means, because this attacks every 60 seconds. You can, for example, see in one of my videos called Hack Attack and I think live assaults every 60 seconds. So I can tell that the computer is firing the microwave emitters which have been placed at my neighbors' houses. But even the brain map / brainfuck project is just a cover story. The real story is the asset stripping of the Western countries. That's the real story. And that is where you make a lot of money. Okay? And it's for the cartel that is now has exploited pretty much everything else already. It already has exploited Africa, it already exploited parts of Asia, it exploited Russia and China after the Second World War already. So what is there left to exploit? And you very quickly settle on, oh, it's the US and the Western world. So this is what it is. It's about the actual asset stripping of the Western world. And to be able to do that, you have to run an Intelligenzaktion, you have to get rid of the intelligentsia. And the best and quickest way, it seems to be, is to convince the UN that you have to have some sort of a neuro society where all the brains are connected. I mean, God, anybody who does computer science knows that doing that is just nonsense. You don't want to connect all this stuff together. You want to have modules, totally detached, autonomous modules. That's the way to actually do it properly. But not one big, monolithic, oh my God, sort of stuff. So that's what we're dealing with. Okay, so now we have the, the sort of background, and we know that the brain mapping is just a side story. We know that the heads of the intelligence agencies are Monarch programs, so that they are scared to snap out of it because they think they might murder their wife. So what are we going to do? Because we have to be here, like by yesterday, but we are down here in the corruption and the directed energy weapon attacks. So this is where the system broadcast comes in. Okay, this is the system broadcast, which, just like on the Titanic, has to reach all levels. And why do we need to reach all levels? Because we have to literally get everybody on deck and pass on the message that we have hit the Titanic. So now what we need is every single independent mind on the planet that we can get to think of a solution. Okay, you have to think of a solution independently of each other, because only when you're independent are your thoughts actually adding something new to somebody else's. If we're all interconnected by this like absolutely cockeyed, insane brain telecommunication system, we're gonna end up dumber than we are already collectively. And you know, you might argue that that's the point, and the cartel holders want us all connected through this like brain mess program, and they themselves are the only people who are not connected and therefore clear in the head. I can see that, yes. But either way, the heads of the cartels have to understand that they do not have enough ingenuity or intelligence by themselves to actually sort out these problems. They really don't. So instead, what they need to do is to allow absolutely every person to reach their potential, to put ideas into practice, and so on and so on. So what we need to do is we need to run that part of the system in reverse. Instead of just accumulating more power and locking more and more people into these monolithic organizations, we need to slam the engines into reverse and actually have more autonomous groups thinking for themselves and acting for themselves until we actually, manage to pull through the sinking Titanic situation. That is the only way we can do that. So for that, we need to throw the entire human systems we have into reverse. Okay, so this is where, for example, the prolific pedophile arrests come in. That is gnawing at the control structure, right? That is the pedophile control files. But the fact that only Jimmy Savile was arrested already shows you that there are many, many more high-level pedophiles who have not been arrested, because this guy was just one in the control system. The entire control system is the same, right? So they just made him the fall guy, that is pretty obvious, because everybody here will be of exactly the same, disposition, and will have the same sort of control files. Okay, now we are now at the task of slamming the engines into reverse. And I can tell you that just doing it by yourself, one cog will not be enough. One oligarch by him or herself, mostly himself, will not be enough. We need to reach all the oligarchs, and you guys have to do it together. And there's something else. We have to do it at all scales. And now this is the key. This is actually really, really important for the system broadcast. And slamming the engines in reverse. There's one thing that you notice about the legacy systems that we have, which is that they are pyramid hierarchies, okay? But the way they're designed also means that they are a fractal system. So this means they are scale invariant, okay? As for those of you who don't know what a fractal is, it is if you just zoom in to the smallest element, you see the same structure as if you zoom out. So if I'm zooming in, I see a pyramid, people following a leader. Okay. If I zoom out a bit more, I see a pyramid, people following a leader. Okay, so these teams following a leader. If I zoom out yet more, I see a pyramid, right? It is people following a leader. And it is through this means that this Uber-cartel self-assembles. And this Uber-cartel actually exists. It has been set to exist in the 18th and 19th century, and before, people suspected that there was something that was called the cartel, the syndicate, the brotherhood, blah 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 blah, and the old boys network. And it really does exist, and it has been mapped by a group of Swiss mathematicians at ETH Zurich, and they published a paper in 2011, which they entitled The Network of Global Corporate Control. And that is this self-assembled, well, not really self-assembled, you know, I mean, you know what I mean. It was assembled on purpose by the cartel holders, but overall the system and the existence of these cartel holders came about by itself. And in this paper, The Network of Global Corporate Control, you can also see that they are all these, they analyzed 43,000 public companies, global companies, and they discovered that 40% have interlocking board memberships such that they are actually one entity, where the flow of control is such that you can control these organizations through your, you know, your voting membership of boards. And thereby this cartel managed to lever or punch above its weight by not having the share ownership, but by having the board membership. So, you know, that's the network of global corporate control. It includes the banks and many, many other things, and billionaires and all this sort of stuff. And that's all part of the control architecture of the world. So that cartel exists, but it is organizing all these companies into, you know, head office with 2 branches, and then several head offices, you know, with a local manager and then regional manager, and so on and so on, and then it ties into another company and another company and another company, and it just goes on and on and on like that. So that is how this network is, network of global corporate control is designed. It is also fractal, like this diagram is fractal, and if you still don't know what a fractal is, there's this vegetable, and I have to admit, I'm a bit embarrassed, but I don't know what it's called. It looks like this. It looks like the spikes on the back of dragons. Do you know what I mean? This thing. So it's a bit of that vegetable. And this vegetable is a fractal. If you look at it, it has these big outgrowths, okay, like here, here, and here. And then on each of those, it has little outgrowths, which look just like the big ones. And then if you look carefully, each one of those has, you know, little triangles in turn, and little like blobs. Maybe you can see it on the side better, which are exactly the same structure again. So if you look at this entire thing, if you zoom into just one blob, or if you go even smaller, you will see exactly the same structure. And sorry, you probably noticed the injuries in my face. These are the directed energy weapon attacks, as they're trying to drill into my head at night and, you know, during the day and so on, and my skin gets infected. Sorry about that. That's the consequence of this. So with this vegetable, you now understand what a fractal is. You know, it's no matter how far you zoom in, you see exactly the same structure. If you zoom out, you see the same structure. And this is broken off a bigger vegetable, which, you know, on the big scale looks just like one of these, you know. So that is a fractal. So we're dealing with a fractal organization, which means, or a fractal system, which means it is scale invariant. So in other words, whatever works at one level will work at another level. Okay, more or less. There are emergent effects, which I don't want to get into, but this is roughly it. So this means whatever works in a team of just 5 or 6 people, roughly speaking, will also work at the level of the oligarchs. And you can tell that this has to be the case, more or less, because every single person, every single node in the human system is a person, is an actual human being. And human beings only have 24 hours per day, and human beings can only really keep in touch with about more or less 60 people on a regular basis. So there's this sort of renormalization effect in human systems, and that preserves the scale invariance. It means that you might have a boss that is super powerful, but at the end of the day, his day is only, yeah, at the end of the day, no pun intended, it's only 24 hours long. And also he can only read that many emails and that many project reports and whatnot, and therefore his sort of radius of direct influence and also radius of information absorption will be pretty constant. Okay, but yet he will wield a lot of influence. So what this means is that the same message that I would pass to people on the ground, I would have to pass to people at the top. Okay, so so what would that be? I'm sorry, I really need to go to bed now. I'm passing out from tiredness. But what would that be? Well, the message is that we need to throw the engines into reverse, right? To be able to do that, the people at the top of the intelligence agencies need to break their Monarch programming. They need to break their Monarch programming. In a sense, it's the realization that everybody here, the gang stalkers are afraid of their handlers. The handlers are afraid of some senior person in MI5. And the people in MI5 and MI6 are scared of the head or, the leadership, who then in turn turns out to be also not his own man or his own woman, because he's Monarch programmed. So there's somebody above. So now the question is, if you want to throw the engines into reverse to pump the water out of the Titanic, what do we do? Well, everybody, instead of being scared of their handlers, and kicking down, you have to reverse it. You have to stop kicking down. You have to turn on your handlers. And that is easier than you think because of this tapering. So you have, even in the simplest diagram, you've got two people turning on one person, two people turning on one person, two people turning on one person. Do you see? And this is why at this level, at the level of the heads of MI5 and the level of the gang stalkers, it is exactly the same sort of behavior you need to adopt. The same sort of inhibition threshold and barrier and control mechanism, more or less. Some are stronger than others, but then again, those people are psychopaths. So, you have to overcome this, and you all have to turn on your handlers. You have to turn on your handlers. And there might be reasons that you would want to turn on your handlers, very good ones. And number one is that we are now living in an age of information flow accelerating. And this means that information cannot be kept hidden for very long periods of time. And this means that in the olden days, whereby you could have, you build up your network of pedophiles whom you can control, and you get them addicted to pedophilia, or you provide, children for them over a very long time. Now, if you wanted to set up a control architecture from scratch like that, the news of a pedophile offense might reach the police even before the pedophile, reaches or leaves the building, because you can tweet it, you can text it, you can email it. So it's this sort of acceleration that will bring a very huge cost to criminal behavior over time. Okay, it surprises you. It's not the case now, but it's over time this will be the case. So this control architecture is falling to bits already. So we have to go at it even quicker. And there might be reasons why you would want to, and now I'm really rooting around, but I have to, I'm afraid. I have to, because this is the reason why. The reason why even senior heads of intelligence might want to actually break this pattern. Number one, an example, which I don't know if it's true or not, but I was looking for something like that, because it's like this: if you want to tie people into this loyalty scheme, right? I mean, you would start off with organizing people into Freemasonry and this sort of stuff. But then you have these loyalty schemes, and to prove your worth, to be trusted at the next level, you have to do increasingly more ruthless things. And to really be trusted, you have to do something extremely, extremely ruthless. So if you've got people at the very top, the question is, what was that? What was their really ruthless offense that made them reliable for the system? And one of the things that has been floated over and over is human sacrifice. And of course you can have senior psychopaths just killing children and then, you know, proving their worth through that, and then repeatedly killing children. And, you know, that is where this entire Pizzagate story comes in. If you have psychopaths trying to prove to each other that they're still psychopaths, and then they start with one-upmanship, and you have psychopaths out psychopathing others. You know, I mean, it's sick. And, you know, sorry, I've got a smile on my face. There's absolutely nothing to smile about, because it is just horrific. It is like serial killers trying to outdo each other, because, you know, you would have serial killers. So that's one thing, killing other people, killing children. But then there's an even stronger control mechanism, which is to kill your own child. And yes, you just look at, you know, past heads of intelligence, and then, you know, you would think, did one of the children die? And if it's an entry-level sort of thing, you would think that maybe their firstborn child die. And then you start wondering, did it just die of natural causes? Or has it been sacrificed? Or did someone sacrifice it? Or did you have to offer it up for sacrifice? Or all these things, which are sadly also part of it. But then the question is, in an information society, would even senior level psychopaths, if they're just thinking in a calculated, cool manner, would they want to put that burden onto their children, who you know, I would expect them to want to rise to the higher levels as they did as well. And I would encourage them that the answer is no, you don't want that. So the system has to come down, okay? And it's number one is the sort of the murder of children, and I'm not making this up. I mean, you know, having your eldest born kidnapped or murdered, or, you know, you murdering it, you know, as to sacrifice your own baby is, I think, the strongest sort of proving your own self-worth that one could think about. So I would expect it at the highest levels. People who have risen to the highest levels most likely have something like that, you know. Sadly, but then again, we're now in the system broadcast where we're talking at all levels, so it doesn't matter if you're talking to, you know, the biggest structure or the smallest structure. It's the same sort of message. You have to turn on your handlers. Whatever your handlers said or did is not right. And why do you have to turn on your handlers? It's because if there's one thing I've managed to figure out about this global system, is that if we continue doing what we were all doing beforehand, and if you continue acting like we're expected to do, the system is set up that we all die. We are meant to be taken over from abroad. So if we continue behaving the way we do, that will happen. Okay, so, you know, I don't really want to go into the details now of who might be taking us over. It's pretty obvious if you study this structure I mentioned called the Network of Global Corporate Control. But the more important point is, why would we want to not be taken over? And number one is because the plan is that 2/3 of us are meant to be killed off. Well, that's a beautiful plan. There's only one problem with that. Is if you kill off 2/3 of the population, you can't maintain the complex systems that you have. That's the problem. You just can't. We need the ingenuity of absolutely everybody. So you can't kill off 2/3 of the people. And then there's another thing, which is the collapsing ecosystems. And you can say, okay, I want to kill everybody so that the ecosystems can recover. The problem with that is that if you kill off 2/3, you will end up with production methods that have to operate on very reduced manpower, and I think you'll find you'll end up with the dirtiest manufacturing process you can imagine, because people will be stuck for help, manpower, ingenuity, and so on. So you will not have the best ideas, you will have the quickest ideas, which, as we know, don't tend to be that great. So it is for this reason, the ecosystems, the collapsing ecosystems, are the biggest concern, and to be able to cycle those, we have to, abandoned plans, ironically, to kill 2/3 of the population, you know. Okay, so this is why we would want to cycle the system. Now, there are many other examples I could name. There are many other examples, and they comprise, you know, I mean, there's ones in the public domain. Again, I can just look at stuff. There's, for example, one article in the Daily Mail which shows, at first I didn't spot it. I thought the article was very odd, and the fact that it appeared was very odd, but I didn't really spot the clues, as it were. It was thanks to a lady who was informing me, and she mentioned, she did a wonderful video explaining, you know, Monarch programming and how she ended up being brain controlled and programmed. And I encourage you to actually watch the videos made by what's called Lobstergate and previously known, I think, MKUltra culture. And those videos are great. Those are really great videos because they encapsulate so much about symbolism and about how it's applied and how it works. But she drew my attention to something called the chair dance. And she first mentioned it to do with an famous photograph of Christine Keeler, and how she was controlled and humiliated and photographed naked on a chair. And then, you know, it was explained to me that that's actually part of another way to traumatize and train people and program people. It's this sort of chair dance. And I was rather shocked to see something that looked strikingly like the chair dance appear in an article in the Daily Mail about photographs of a senior military intelligence head's family. And this image, which I will include below. It's in the public domain anyway, and it is now for educational purposes. It's much bigger than just one family, but it's important to know because so many more people will be affected by exactly the same thing. And it shows mother and daughter both doing what looks like a chair dance, which is, I mean, I don't really know all the details, but I think it's to program women to be sex objects for men, basically. And you just have them, you know, show off their attractive features, present themselves to men, and then you program them with that, with many other things. You can use that to humiliate, you can use that to sexualize. Either way, it's about, you know, pulling them down. But what was so shocking is that you have mother and daughter doing the same thing. And this is something that would imply monarch programming. You know, you kind of create slaves. And it means that the mother is a slave and the daughter is a slave as well. And between the two people in the middle of the image is a parrot and a really very colorful parrot that you notice. It sticks out in this image. And what it is, it's parroting. So you have the behavior, what has happened to the mother being parroted in the child. And then I think, given that at this level you would have, you know, the senior head monarch programmed, by this hint, probably the wife as well. Do you really want to offer your daughter up for slavery in the 21st century? Do you really want to do that? Because I don't think you should. I don't think you should. I think this needs to be broken now. So, that is the sad reality. It means that even the heads of these intelligence agencies are some way impaired. They are not their own men and women. and it's about figuring out what exactly the impairment mechanism is. And we need to figure it out, because these guys have to stop mutilating us. They have to stop the human brain fuck project. You know, they really have to. Why do they have to stop that? Well, it's very simple, because if the human brain project, and if any of the synthetic telepathy and all this sort of stuff would be that great, then, and the CIA and all these people would have access to it, then why does the world look the way it does? Because surely these people could figure out how stupid some of these things are that they are doing, and just not do them. You know, in a nutshell, I mean, take the CIA. You know, when sadly all around the world people have got intimate knowledge of the CIA in terms of country experiences, and when the CIA turns up, I assure you the last thought on people's minds is, oh, here come the boy geniuses, right? It just doesn't happen. So where are all these geniuses created by this technology? And I would suggest, most respectfully, that you will not have any sort of geniuses, because natural intelligence works a different way. It is not the way it's made up to be in these algorithms, you know, that is it. But what you're actually doing is you're microwaving your head. By trying to interface with a computer, you're microwaving your head, and you're degrading your head, you're degrading your brain, and that's what's actually happening. So this is it. And by the way, the same thing applies to oligarchs as well. Unless you're the ruler of the world, then you're really, really rich. And being really rich is also like being the head of MI6. You have a lot of power. So people will not let you become really rich unless you have some very, very strong control files on you. So that would again imply that, you know, a lot of the billionaires are Monarch programmed. Maybe they don't know it, or they are somehow trauma based mind control. So MKUltra, Monarch programming, and all these, like, there were many other projects, but that sort of stuff, that's what I would expect to find. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, we have hit the iceberg. We are now not in a normal situation. If we all continue acting the way we are all programmed or expected to act, then we will all sink and die. So everybody at all scales, be that the gang stalkers, be that the victims, be that the heads of military intelligence, or be that oligarchs and billionaires, you all have to start acting in a fundamentally different way. You have to connect with people you would have not connected to before. You have to respect people if you haven't respected before. And yeah, you might even have to understand compassion if you haven't before, because you're a psychopath. So there we are. This is all I've got to say. I really have got to go to bed now. I hope this helps. Remember this. It's a fractal system. So we all, at all scales, have to do our bit. We all have to slam the engine in reverse, and everybody has to turn on their handlers. Everybody. For us to survive. Thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.